Can democracy survive billionaires? Democracy typically means political equality, but billionaires represent extreme economic inequality. So, are they compatible? My first posit would be that billionaires represent a systemic outcome. So, I'm not really interested in discussing whether an individual billionaire is a decent human being or not. I think that extensive wealth corrodes the soul. I think that's pretty clear from the Epstein file drops and from what we see over the course of the past 50 plus years. Well, actually, all of human history. What I'm really looking at is on a systemic level, what do they represent and what do they mean for our society? Extreme wealth cannot accumulate without structures that extract value from labor, resources, and markets. So, in other words, I don't believe that billionaires can exist without necessary exploitation of labor. In other words, people to do the work for them, without resources that they pull from the common good of a society and through markets that they must, to reach that level of wealth, come to dominate. So some examples of this would be wage suppression, layoffs, boosting stock prices. They outsource labor to cheaper regions, cutting wages and benefits. They raise the prices of products while reducing the quality of said products. They extract rent and ownership of essential assets. So a large conglomerate corporation will buy up large quantities of single family homes. They will buy up access to water. These are things that everyone needs to live. They'll buy it up and then they have market capture of those essential assets. So this allows the wealthy, the holders of these resources, the owners, to extract ongoing payment from the working class, from ordinary everyday people, which is the 99% of us. So market capture and monopolies is where billionaires exist. It's where they must exist to accumulate that level of wealth. Supposedly ethical billionaires, they benefit from a system that is built on extraction and exploitation on a systemic level. So the key idea here is that billionaires are not the sole cause of the system. I'm not saying everything broken about our society is the billionaire's fault, but they are the most visible product of it. They are the most visible symptom of a society built on extraction. The other problem with billionaires is that wealth converts into political power quite easily. And this is true historically as well as today. So modern campaigns, the way they function is they require large budgets due to advertising costs, due to staff, travel, media operations, and candidates, the ones that are running for office today in America, depends on these sort of large donors to fund their campaigns. So this causes a shift in political incentives away from the voters. So now you don't have congressmen, right, and senators that are representing the people. They're representing those billionaires and those corporations who they know will fund the next campaign. This sets up the incentive for them to prioritize the donor class over the working class. So corporations spend tens or hundreds of millions on lobbyists. These individuals, these lobbyists that are bought and paid for by the billionaires and the corporations and sent to Capitol Hill, literally have a part in drawing legislation. They meet with lawmakers, right? They help shape regulatory policy that is supposed to regulate them, but they're involved in that process, right? They advocate for their own interests constantly, the interest of who they are representing. Regulatory capture would be another way that wealth converts into political power. Regulators often come from the industries they regulate. So those that are supposed to be regulating, they may leave the government having worked in the government, and then after they retire out of the government, they go work for the same industries. So it behooves them, if you just think through this logically, it behooves them. It incentivizes dishonesty. It incentivizes corruption, because if they're lax on the policy making, then it will literally benefit them. They can go step into a nice cushy job after they leave the government. So there's this back and forth, or evolving door of regulatory capture. So wealthy individuals and corporations own media outlets. Many of the most famous ones that we all know of are owned by billionaire people. They fund think tanks, they sponsor political messaging. This shapes public narrative. And it shapes people's opinions because what they are putting in front of people's eyes, the stories they choose to highlight, what they are choosing to show us on the news, the various media outlets, right, is controlled by a group of people with an objective. And that objective is making more money and gaining more power. A system where political survival depends on wealthy donors will inevitably produce politicians who prioritize the wealthy. So, we are told a narrative that the capitalist system in which we currently live is the true driver of economic freedom, that an open marketplace of ideas and concepts and innovation is the way to achieve said freedom. But I believe that is a lie. Over the past 50 years, and in times before that, what we have seen is that a pattern emerges across various industries. Competition slowly disappears as large corporations acquire and eliminate their rivals. The result is market capture, where a handful of firms control the majority production, pricing, and distribution. A great example of this, and one that is referenced quite often in these sort of discussions, is insulin. So in 1996, a vial of insulin cost on average $21. In 2019, that same vial rose to $275 on average. All right. So in nearly a 30-year period, that's a 1,200% increase. During this time, manufacturing didn't increase much. But now 3 companies dominate the production of insulin, and this is the result. Captured markets and wealth concentrated destroys markets. We do not have free markets. That is a fabrication and it is a lie. Studies show that over 1 million people ration due to the pricing, and there are a handful of deaths every single year for no other reason than greed. That's it. This is not a free market where ideas and products battle it out for consumer attention and patronage. This is something much darker and more sinister. Free markets require competition, but concentrated wealth, it eliminates that competition. So my point is that billionaires are both symptom and driver of society as it stands today. They were created within the system, but then they propagate the system. They keep the system going. They reinforce it. System produces them, but once they exist, they reinforce that system. Wealth funds the lobbying, media influence, political capture. It's a nasty, despicable feedback loop. So, what am I advocating for? I'm not advocating for violent seizures of assets. I fear authoritarianism in whatever form it may take. We need progressive taxation. We need a wealth tax. We need anti-monopoly enforcement. We need political finance reform. We need all of these things. And so the point is not to go in and violently stop billionaires from existing, right? But to fade them out over time through extensive and extreme reforms within the system. To go over my points briefly again, to sort of bring it all together. Point 1, this isn't really about whether individual billionaires are good or bad people. Some may even try to do good with their wealth. The real issue is systemic. Billionaires are not just wealthy individuals, all right? That's important. They're not just that. They are the most visible outcome of an economic system that allows wealth to concentrate at an extreme scale. And even when individuals don't consciously exploit anyone, they still benefit from a structure that extracts enormous value from labor and markets. My second point, the real problem begins when that wealth converts into power, specifically political power. Billionaires fund lobbying operations, corporations spend millions influencing policy, campaign donations and political funding shape who gets elected and what policies are even passed. At that point, elected officials begin representing wealth and donors rather than citizens. And when that happens, we are no longer functioning as a true democracy. Ironically, extreme wealth concentration doesn't just threaten democracy, it also threatens capitalism itself. Free markets depend on competition. But when these massive corporations and the billionaire class buy up competitors and capture entire industries, Competition, it disappears. Prices rise, consumers lose choices, and the market stops regulating itself. So, can democracy survive billionaires? Not indefinitely. And I would argue that we currently don't even have true democracy. If we don't reform, if we don't radically change course, the answer is certainly not.